GP Mania has come to Mandalika as we get set for the first Grand Prix of Indonesia in a quarter of a century. Who will rock in Lombok? It's time to race in MotoGP. So the 4.3 kilometre Pertamina Mandalika circuit, 2.6 miles, first opened just last November. 17 corners, 11 rights, including 6 lefts. Comparatively low top speed, 193.3 miles an hour, 311.2 kilometres. The fastest lap of the Grand Prix, well, fastest lap of the weekend so far, set by Fabio Quartararo on his way to pole position. Coming up in MotoGP, Fabio Quartararo targets a return to winning ways from his 25th career pole. Can Jorge Martin be the master of Mandalika as the Spaniard starts second? Will Pramac power propel Johann Zarco to the podium as he starts on the front row? And sadly we're missing Marc Marquez, sidelined after a big crash in the warm-up earlier on today. Good afternoon and welcome back to the Pertamina Grand Prix of Indonesia. It's wonderful Indonesia, but sadly it is now a wet Indonesia. The torrential rain that we feared was going to strike and hit this beautiful island of Lombok just before the start.
The race came to a conclusion with spots of rain in the air. They've seen plenty of rainfall since then. The green flag waves and Johann Zarco leads the field out for this sighting lap. They'll do one lap to the grid. And then at 15 minutes past the hour, the Indonesian Grand Prix will be underway. World champion Fabio Quartararo starts from pole position. Just how much has his wet weather riding come on since last season? Of course, it was his difficulties in the wet conditions and mixed conditions that saw him start the Grand Prix that eventually concluded with him as world champion back at the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix last year from 15th on the grid. And he put those problems behind him and give his World Championship defence the kickstart that it needs.
This is a massive step into the unknown for these MotoGP riders. They've done barely a handful of wet weather laps. Certainly the track wasn't as wet as this on Saturday morning. So this really is stepping into the unknown territory. Who's going to quickly master the conditions? Who's going to take the big risks? Jack Miller, well, you know that he's so good in the wet conditions. He's proven to be strong on the Ducati and the Honda in the past. Of course, it was mixed conditions when he took that famous win at the Dutch TT in Assen back in 2016. Who else has got really strong wet weather prowess in this field? Frankie Morbidelli's actually not a bad wet weather rider. Other guys with nothing to lose really, Andrea Dovizioso, particularly on a factory Ducati, where you could always put your money on him to be a big threat in these rain conditions. You've got to say, the way that Fabio Quartararo has thrown that Yamaha around that second sector, there's been a lot of feedback from the World Superbike riders here and the Moto3 riders who've had a couple of wet sessions, and the grip levels here in the rain at this Mandalika circuit are very good. Very good indeed. So you can see the guys are just out there now trying to understand where the patches of water are, where the water's perhaps at its worst, and then also just work out the grip levels. Pecco Bagnaia, also relatively inexperienced in terms of wet weather riding in MotoGP as well.
Alex Rins is a rider I'd perhaps point to as well, who might have half a chance in these conditions. He starts in the middle of the third row in 8th place. Pit lane closes in 4 minutes time, which is why you're seeing riders come back down pit lane. They do have time to do this. This isn't like the quick restart procedure where you have 60 seconds to get out there before the pit lane closes again. So understandably, some of the smart cookies on this grid, the two Pramac riders, the two Suzuki riders, taking the opportunity to do an extra lap of the track before they pull up on the grid, just to get a little bit more information, just to see where some of the damper patches are, where some of the grip levels are. KTM, of course, they'll fancy their chances this afternoon. Brad Binder, last time we saw conditions like this, was winning a race on slicks. Of course, he won't be running them today. Miguel Oliveira, also looking good. He starts 7th on the grid. Their team boss, Francesco Guidotti, is speaking now with Simon.
Francesco, we now step into the unknown. I'd love to know how your riders go into this race, how they've been feeling in the box, and we do know how in the unknown Brad often pulls out something special. What are your thoughts?
Difficult to have an opinion, difficult to predict something. We never raced here before, and the conditions are completely different than the test and the practice for the weekend. So yeah, let's start and we'll see. But the guys are in a good mood. Both of them usually perform well in the wet conditions. So yeah, finger crossed and let's go.
Best of luck.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks to Francesco Guidotti. A great start, as Lewis said, for the KTM team in Doha. Brad Binder, his 3rd podium finish in the Premier class. I wonder if he's going to be tempted to go out on slick tyres. Joking, of course. That was, of course, his brilliant victory at the Red Bull Ring in the Austrian Grand Prix last year. So finally, we are getting the grid forming here at the Pertamina Mandalika circuit in Indonesia. Pramac Ducati await their man, Jorge Martin and Johann Zarco, both going from the front row of the grid. Brad Binder, there's going to be some nerve jangling now because, as we mentioned, we can't overemphasise, this is a complete blank canvas, a complete journey into the unknown for these guys. They've never raced before here in Mandalika. They've certainly got very little experience of wet weather conditions. In some respects, it might be a bit of a lottery, but it's certainly going to provide some nail-biting entertainment. We hope you have sports show on earth as we look at Enea Bastianini starting from the middle of that 2nd row. Binder and Bastianini, Lewis, in the dry. You really fancy them to be strong, given they've excelled in the Doha from really good qualifying performances. Let's quickly pop down to the grid again. Piero Taramasso and Michelin, they've been thrown an 11th hour curveball, haven't they, by these tricky conditions? Simon's with the Michelin Motorsport manager, Piero Taramasso.
Yes, Piero, some new conditions for you to make the weekend even tougher. Can you tell us what tyres the riders will go for?
Yeah, in this condition the choice is medium front and medium rear. This is the one because the track temperature is still quite high, is around 25, 26 degrees. And also because here the tricky point is the overheating on the right side. And with the soft compound, the problem that you might overheat too much, you lose grip. With the medium will be much more stable. So this is the best choice for this condition.
Thank you, Piero.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks to Piero Taramasso. We're just running through this revised grid now, of course, revised, sadly, because 8 times world champion Marc Marquez has been ruled out of this delayed Indonesian Grand Prix. There is the president then, Mr. Joko Widodo, who is finally, after all of his effort and all the effort of the authorities here in Indonesia, it looks like, thankfully, we are going to get MotoGP action here in Indonesia for the first time since 1997.
Well, the Shaman certainly did the trick in the end. We got the race we were hoping for.
Yeah, whatever that lady's name was, get her inducted into the MotoGP Hall of Fame very, very quickly, because yes, it does look like the rain banisher, or whatever she was called by the locals. She normally goes to big events like weddings and parties.
She'll be getting a position at the FIM, I think. She'll be taken to every Grand Prix over the course of the year now to try and ward off any potential wet races or cancellations. So we're about to get underway then for this Indonesian Grand Prix, and Enea Bastianini goes into it.
But I guess just trying to keep himself focused, trying to hide some of the nerves that will inevitably be hitting these riders. This is nerve-wracking stuff. This is tense. This is where these guys are really, their skills are put to the limit, their concentration, their focus, because they're just about to encounter a racetrack in conditions that they've never experienced before. It's a bit of a level playing field, this, isn't it? it's going to be a case of fortune favouring the brave. Jack Miller, normally he revels in these kind of conditions. Even Thriller Miller looks a little bit pensive as we count down towards race time here in Mandalika.
Just 6 minutes to go then. Speaking, of course, earlier on, we were discussing the potential strategies that might be deployed in a dry weather race, and the big talking point, I suppose, was Fabio Quartararo's determination, I think, to get to the front of the race and get a clear track, with the Ducatis looking to stop him doing so. In many ways, even though it's a wet race, that is still the aim for Fabio Quartararo, more because of the visibility here rather than any kind of issues with overheating front tyres. We're still expecting to see a little bit of spray, more than a little bit of spray. There will still be some standing water in patches of this racetrack. We've already heard from Piero Taramasso that there are still some patches as the virtual fan wall. Get ready to see this historic first Indonesian Grand Prix in 25 years. If we are going to see some spray, particularly in the early laps with the field all running together, it's going to be so important for these guys to try and get a clear track as soon as possible.
Yeah, Fabio Quartararo would not have known how perhaps significant that pole position was yesterday. He knew it was going to be good and crucial in dry conditions. Well, it might be absolutely vital now with, as Lewis said, the potential for spray hitting the riders that are in the chasing pack. An excellent weekend so far then for this young man, Fabio Di Giannantonio. Very, very limited experience of that Ducati in rain conditions. This is going to be a tough test of the mettle for these MotoGP riders. 5 minutes then to the race start here in Mandalika, and finally we can say there's going to be MotoGP race action in Indonesia. Our first visit to Southeast Asia since 2019.
One rider perhaps to identify that we haven't mentioned yet, who will certainly fancy his chances in these conditions. Starts all the way back in 18th on the grid. The brother of this man, Marc Marquez, if you're just joining us, will not start this Grand Prix due to a concussion sustained in the warm-up earlier on today, as some drizzle starts to fall, as Simon Crafar lets us know from pit lane. But Alex Marquez, his brother, of course, took a sensational podium, his first podium in MotoGP in very wet conditions at Le Mans, and very nearly won that Grand Prix as he was chasing down Danilo Petrucci. He'll certainly be a rider who will have a big result on his hands potentially today. Certainly a bigger result than he thought when he qualified 18th yesterday.
Let's just hope then that that rain that's just starting to fall a little bit heavier again, as the team personnel are told to clear the grid, that it doesn't start falling as ferocious as what it did about an hour ago, which caused this lengthy delay here for the MotoGP return to Indonesia for the first time since 1997. Understandably, some really tense, anxious looking faces down there on the grid. Somebody give Aleix Espargaro a glass of water. He looked like he got a real dry mouth. So here it is then. Finally, we're about to get underway in MotoGP here in Indonesia. Two Pramac Ducatis on the front row of the grid. Johann Zarco in third place. Jorge Martin starts from second place, but it's the reigning world champion Fabio Quartararo who starts from pole position in our first Indonesian Grand Prix in 25 long years. Don't go anywhere, folks. 20 laps of pure drama and theatre coming your way in MotoGP up next.
Who will be the cars from pole position ahead of the Pramac Ducatis of Jorge Martin and Johann Zarco? Brad Binder heads the KTM Challenge from the front of the second row ahead of the reigning World Championship leader Enea Bastianini. Keep an eye out for the rookies. They're led by Fabio Di Giannantonio. He starts in the middle of row 4 with Marco Bezzecchi just behind him. Pol Espargaro on the 5th row. He is the sole Repsol Honda challenger in this Grand Prix due to the injury sustained by Marc Marquez earlier this morning. In wet conditions with drizzle starting to fall once again, these are challenging conditions for the best riders in the world. Let's go racing in MotoGP.
So we've been waiting 72 minutes since we thought this Indonesian Grand Prix would be getting underway, and finally, as the rain just starts to fall, the warm-up lap then does finally get underway here in Mandalika. The fans have waited so long for this special moment. And we are going to get the Pertamina Grand Prix of Indonesia over that shortened race distance, 20 laps of course. Sadly, we are missing the absent 8-time world champion Marc Marquez, missing after a concussion sustained in a bruising. They're already going through turn 5.
Here's what happened to Fabio Quartararo. I said earlier on in the warm-up, don't touch the curbs, and Fabio Quartararo got on the curb and it just lost him all his momentum.
I think that's what happened as well, Lewis. Our team back in 8th. Now then, what has happened to the number 89? Is he on the curbs as well?
Whoa!
On the white line. Slippery as you like. Look at this. He's on the curb, on the white line, and how on earth has he stayed on board that? That kicked sideways. Not for him at all. He was only just able to break into the 141s. Whoa! How on earth has he saved that? That was even better than the Martin save.
Yeah, the fact that he went off into the runoff, that was a save, really. The fact that he didn't go.
I'm sure he's got no idea as well how he stayed on top of that factory Ducati. He's still in the Grand Prix. There's Paulo Oliveira, Miguel Oliveira's father, of course, a constant sidekick for the Portuguese man, who again finds another fastest lap of the Grand Prix, a 140, 148.
Is just behind him. We're going to see what's happened to Paul. He's touched the white line and he's gone way off track.
Wow, that was a monument.
Out front, here he is, clear visor as we see the concentration from the Portuguese. Jack Miller actually, to his credit, responded to the challenge of Zarco on that last lap. Miller setting his personal best lap of the race in the mid 1 minute 39s, and Quartararo 1.8 seconds behind his fellow Frenchman in 4th. Alex Rins did a 140.7. Of course, we saw a slow start to that.
Quartararo with what, 1 lap and 10 corners remaining.
Against the odds in some respects in Barcelona last year, and then a victory, a real dominant wet weather victory here as the President of the Republic of Indonesia, Joko Widodo, passes over the trophies to our top 3. Johann Zarco, our 3rd place man, Fabio Quartararo in 2nd place. This was the first time Fabio Quartararo has met him. He wasn't at the parade on Wednesday. Quartararo, one of the sweetest trophies and the most precious 20 points he's perhaps picked up in his career. But Miguel Oliveira then, he is your race winner. The President hands over the trophy. It took us 25 years, but it was certainly worth the wait, and magnificent Miguel mastered the wet conditions in Mandalika this afternoon.
As Miguel Oliveira takes his first win of the season.
And the shift isn't over yet. Stick around for After the Flag as we break down all the action very, very shortly. But Miguel Oliveira taking the victory then from Fabio Quartararo and Johann Zarco, 2 Frenchmen on the podium. Jack Miller led early on but slipped to 4th, but he opens his account for the season ahead of the Suzukis of Rins and Mir. Morbidelli in 7th, ahead of Brad Binder and Aleix Espargaro. Darren Binder, one of the stars of the day, pipping the championship leader Enea Bastianini to 10th. Paul Espargaro in 12th, ahead of Alex Marquez and Luca Marini. And Pecco Bagnaia opens his account for the season, but just 1 point for the Ducati man. Maverick Vinales still yet to get off the board. He's 16th today. Raul Fernandez next up in 17th, ahead of Fabio Di Gianantonio. Takaki Nakagami, he had a race to forget, although he did pit Marco Bezzecchi by just 2 thousandths of a second. Remy Gardner was the last rider home. Jorge Martin crashed out, and Andrea Dovizioso had technical problems. Bastianini then leads the championship to Argentina, but look how close it is. 10 points cover the top 9 riders in the World Championship, with Brad Binder in 2nd, Quartararo in 3rd. Miguel Oliveira, he's on the board, up to 4th, ahead of Johann Zarco, and the Espargaro brothers with Rins and Mir 8th and 9th. Franco Morbidelli is into the top 10, having scored points for the 2nd race in a row. Jack Miller moves ahead of Marc Marquez, who of course didn't start the Grand Prix today due to a concussion. He is on the 11 points that he scored in Qatar, 1 place ahead of Darren Binder. Nakagami, Marini, Vinales, Alex Marquez, Dovizioso, Remy Gardner and Pecco Bagnaia completely top 20. 4 riders still yet to score. They are Raul Fernandez, Fabio Di Gianantonio, Marco Bezzecchi and Jorge Martin. Unsurprisingly, given that he leads the overall championship, Enea Bastianini also leads the Independent Riders' Championship. 6 points clear of Johann Zarco, with Darren Binder up to 3rd in the Independent Riders' Championship after a sensational ride through the field to the top 10 today. Red Bull KTM Factory Racing lead the Teams Championship for the first time in MotoGP. They are 12 points clear of Monster Energy Yamaha MotoGP. Suzuki, they climb a place up to 3rd as Repsol Honda drop down to 4th. Gresini Racing in 5th with Pramac in 6th. Pretty 7th, Ducati Lenovo team, well, they've registered their first points of the season, which put them provisionally in 8th position, just ahead of LCR Honda. With you, RNF Yamaha complete the top 10. The Independent Teams Championships, only the leading rider across the line for each team scores points in this particular classification, which is why Cressini Racing lead it on 30 points, courtesy of Enea Bastianini, 6 clear of Pramac Racing, with LCR Honda in third. KTM, for the first time, lead the Constructors' Championship. A bit of a reshuffle in the championship at this very early stage in the season. They are 4 points ahead of Ducati, whose top point scorer today, of course, was Johann Zarco. Yamaha lift themselves off the bottom up to third, with Suzuki also climbing to fourth. Honda, who had such a great start to the season, they had a poor weekend. They're down to fifth, with Aprilia in sixth.
So world champion Fabio Quartararo led a shortened 20-lap MotoGP race away from pole position after a 75-minute rain delay. Great launch on the Monster Energy Yamaha machine for the Frenchman. Great start as well by our eventual winner Miguel Oliveira, who quickly slotted himself into second place, having started from 7th on the third row. Visibility was a problem if you were a bit further down the pack, as Alex Rins got picked off quickly by the fast-starting front row starter Johann Zarco, as Jack Miller also came into early podium contention. Mistake exiting the final corner allowed Miguel Oliveira through on Fabio Quartararo to power into the lead, as Miller's charge towards the front continued as he passed Oliveira on the brakes into turn 10, the Aussie looking for his 4th MotoGP win. Big scare exiting the final corner on the damp curbs for Jorge Martin. Unfortunately, he was to crash out later on in the race at turn 1. This was the key move though. Jack Miller struggling for grip and Miguel Oliveira pounced into turn 12, and from that moment onwards it was a masterclass in tricky conditions. Andrea Dovizioso unfortunately was ruled out with a technical problem on his With You Yamaha, and after his big scare at the final corner at the start of the Grand Prix, this time Jorge Martin didn't get away with it, hitting a puddle in the braking zone for the first corner. Down he went. Another massive scare for Repsol Honda's Pol Espargaro on a bad day for HRC, with Marc Marquez sidelined through injury. Johann Zarco's podium charge started to really gather momentum when he passed Alex Rins for third. Next in his sights was Thriller Miller, who was able to make light work late on of the Australian, as the two Ducati men fought for the final place on the podium. This was when Zarco made his charge towards second at the time, with Quartararo also coming right back into contention. El Diablo was the fastest man on the circuit at this point, and it was a hard move on the brakes in the first corner which picked up Zarco. Oliveira though by this point was well clear. Quartararo though found incredible late speed and took a second place that felt like a win for him. This was his move crucially into second by Miller. His team keeping informed of exactly where Johann Zarco was as he headed towards his first podium of 2022. This man though was unstoppable. Miguel Oliveira was the man in Mandalika. What a way for MotoGP to return to Indonesia for the first time in 1997. We can't wait to do it all over again next year. Of course, South America next on our world tour in Termo 3 or Honda. But here in Mandalika, Miguel Oliveira takes the win in round 2. Join us next time in Argentina.